The shuttle descended through layers of pale turquoise clouds with a tired groan that reminded Ethan Mercer of old transport carriers that had complained just as loudly before dropping soldiers into places nobody wanted to visit. He smiled despite himself. Apparently, even spacecraft developed bad attitudes after enough years in service. The pilot's synthetic voice crackled through the cabin. "Welcome to Kareth. Local weather is pleasant, gravity is forgiving, and the wildlife has only attempted to eat 3 visitors this month. Statistically, your chances are improving." A few passengers laughed. Ethan simply adjusted the strap of his worn travel bag. Retirement had sounded glorious when he signed the final military document 6 months earlier. No alarms, no encrypted orders, no orbital bombardments lighting up the horizon before breakfast. Just quiet places scattered across forgotten corners of the galaxy. Kareth had looked perfect. No strategic importance, no military bases, no political summits, no one who cared who he had once been. The shuttle landed on a circular platform grown directly from the enormous roots of a living tree whose trunk disappeared so high into the sky that the upper branches blended into drifting clouds. Tiny maintenance drones buzzed among glowing flowers while translucent birds with 4 wings floated lazily between branches, occasionally stopping in midair as though gravity had become optional. As Ethan stepped onto the platform, warm air carrying unfamiliar spices and sweet pollen greeted him. For the first time in years, nothing exploded. He appreciated that. The settlement stretched through the forest in graceful spirals. Homes had been shaped rather than built, coaxed from living wood over generations. Bridges of braided vines shimmered with thin streams of blue energy flowing beneath their surfaces. Floating lanterns drifted wherever pedestrians walked, quietly adjusting their brightness according to the hour. The inhabitants resembled humans enough that Ethan almost forgot he had crossed half the galaxy. Almost. Their long, elegant ears curved gently backward through their silver, black, or crimson hair, twitching ever so slightly whenever someone nearby laughed or raised their voice. Children darted through the streets, chasing tiny, hovering creatures that resembled glowing jellyfish with far too much confidence. One child leapt heroically toward one. The jellyfish casually drifted sideways. The child landed in a decorative fountain. His friends applauded anyway. An elderly woman nodded with approval. Excellent commitment, poor execution. Ethan chuckled. Maybe he was beginning to like this planet already. He found a modest inn overlooking the central gathering grounds. The owner, a broad-shouldered alien with bright green eyes and ears so long they nearly touched his shoulders, handed him a room key carved from polished crystal. "You staying for the gathering of spears?" "I didn't know there was one." The innkeeper stared. "You accidentally scheduled your vacation during the biggest celebration on the planet?" "Apparently." The innkeeper laughed so hard he had to lean on the counter. "You humans truly navigate by luck." "I was aiming for peace." "Wrong week." Outside, preparations filled every street. Gigantic banners woven from shimmering fibers hung between the trees. Artisans assembled mechanical sculptures that moved as though alive. Musicians tuned strange instruments whose notes echoed through the forest like singing stars. Cargo drones carried crates filled with ceremonial armor polished until they reflected the sky. Thousands of visitors poured into the settlement from distant tribes. Some arrived riding 6-legged creatures with crystal antlers. Others descended aboard sleek atmospheric gliders that folded themselves into compact cubes after landing. Ethan wandered without purpose, something he hadn't done in decades. No objective, no target, no extraction point, just walking. It felt strangely difficult. His eyes still measured rooftops for sniper positions. His ears still tracked footsteps automatically. His instincts refused retirement more stubbornly than the paperwork had. He stopped at a food stall where strips of glowing fruit rotated slowly above a field of gentle magnetic energy. "What are these?" The vendor smiled. "They're sweet. Helpful. They're also mildly spicy." Still helpful. And they'll temporarily turn your tongue blue. Ethan blinked. Why? The vendor shrugged. No one solved that mystery. Against better judgment, Ethan bought one. 5 minutes later, he caught his reflection in a polished metal pillar. His tongue looked like it belonged to an expensive nebula. A group of passing children pointed at him. "He ate a sky fruit!" another shouted dramatically. "He survives!" Their laughter echoed across the marketplace. Ethan sighed. "I've survived plasma artillery," he muttered to himself. "Defeated by fruit." The laughter around him blended with music, conversation, and the distant rhythmic pounding of ceremonial drums as the enormous central square continued to fill with warriors, elders, travelers, and spectators from every corner of Kareth. Above them, shimmering satellites reflected the afternoon light into ribbons that danced across the sky, while somewhere beyond the forest, an ancient horn sounded once, deep and resonant, announcing that the gathering of spears was about to begin. Ethan had come to this forgotten world to disappear into the crowd, convinced he had finally left his past somewhere among the stars. He had no idea that somewhere within that growing sea of thousands, a pair of sharp emerald eyes had just found him. The deep note of the ceremonial horn lingered in the air, as if the forest itself had answered it. Conversations gradually dissolved beneath the steady rhythm of drums that echoed from every direction. Ethan found himself carried forward by the flow of thousands moving toward the immense gathering grounds. Rows of polished stone circled a vast open arena. Suspended overhead, dozens of metallic rings floated silently, projecting shimmering constellations that shifted across the daylight sky. Every few moments, the stars rearranged themselves into scenes from ancient tribal victories before scattering again into glowing dust. "Quite the decoration," Ethan murmured. An elderly spectator beside him overheard. "They're not decorations?" "No, they're historians." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "The rings remember every gathering held over the last 3,000 years. I suddenly feel underdressed." The old man looked him up and down. "You are." Ethan laughed. "Fair enough." He found a place near one of the outer circles, intentionally avoiding the honored seats reserved for tribal leaders. Remaining unnoticed had become second nature over the years. The opening ceremony began with astonishing precision. Hundreds of warriors entered from opposite sides of the arena, carrying long spears, whose blades shimmered with controlled energy fields instead of sharpened metal. Every synchronized step caused faint blue pulses to ripple beneath the ground, revealing that the arena itself was some enormous piece of ancient technology hidden beneath layers of living stone. Children gasped. Visitors applauded. Several off-world tourists immediately began recording everything with hovering camera drones. One drone drifted too low. Without interrupting the ceremony, a passing warrior casually flicked the butt of her spear upward. The drone spun through the air. Its owner caught it with both hands. The crowd applauded louder than before. The embarrassed tourist bowed repeatedly. "I deserved that." "You absolutely did," someone answered. Ethan smiled. Military parades across human space suddenly seemed painfully boring. A voice echoed through hidden emitters. "Today, strength honors wisdom." Thousands answered together. "Wisdom guides strength." The response rolled across the valley like thunder. Then came the champions. One after another, they entered the arena, representing different tribes. Some wore lightweight armor that shimmered like liquid silver. Others carried enormous weapons powered by compact fusion cores mounted along their shafts. One warrior walked beside a floating mechanical beast that resembled a wolf built from polished obsidian and glowing circuitry. Another arrived riding a creature with 6 feathered legs and transparent wings. The spectators erupted into cheers with every introduction. Ethan simply watched. Old instincts cataloged equipment, estimated weight, reach, weak points. He caught himself halfway through evaluating one warrior's stance. "Retire already," he muttered to his own brain. His brain politely ignored him. The final introduction never came. Instead, silence. The drums stopped. Even the floating rings overhead dimmed. Every warrior standing inside the arena turned toward the northern entrance. Someone whispered, "She's here." Another answered quietly, "Our first spear." The crowd slowly separated without anyone giving an order. She appeared between two towering pillars carved from luminous crystal. Tall, confident. Every movement carried effortless control. Her dark silver hair rested against armor etched with flowing patterns that glowed faintly beneath the afternoon light. Long, elegant ears extended behind her hair, marked near the tips with thin bands of polished metal denoting countless victories. Across her back rested a spear, unlike the others. Its black shaft seemed carved from solid night. Tiny stars moved beneath its surface. Artificial gravity generators, Ethan realized. Advanced ones. Interesting. She crossed into the arena. Thousands lowered their heads, not from fear, from respect. Ethan remained still. Old military habits. Never imitate customs you don't understand. She acknowledged the greeting with a slight nod before her emerald eyes swept across the enormous gathering. Calmly, methodically, almost professionally. Ethan looked away. No reason to attract attention. A child nearby tugged on his sleeve. "Mister. You're standing where she's looking." "I'm standing where everyone is looking." The child considered this. "Good point." His mother apologized while pulling him back. Ethan chuckled softly. When he looked toward the arena again, the warrior was no longer scanning the crowd. She was staring directly at him. He frowned. Impossible. There were thousands here. Her expression didn't change. No confusion. No uncertainty. Recognition. Ethan instinctively glanced over one shoulder. Maybe someone stood behind. No. Just a food vendor trying to balance 7 bowls on one arm. He looked back. She was still watching him. The noise of the festival seemed strangely distant. Something stirred in the back of his memory. Smoke. A collapsing battlefield. Rain mixed with ash. An armored figure bleeding beside shattered wreckage. He couldn't quite reach the memory before it disappeared again. The warrior took one step forward, then another, ignoring the ceremony, ignoring the assembled champions, ignoring the elders. Someone near the front gasped. "What is she doing?" "I've never seen her leave formation." The murmurs spread faster than wildfire. The warrior continued walking. Not hurried, not hesitant, certain. Straight toward the edge of the arena. Straight toward Ethan. He quietly sighed. This doesn't feel anonymous anymore. The murmur rolling through the gathering grew louder with every step the warrior took. No one tried to stop her. If anything, the sea of spectators parted instinctively, opening a path that stretched from the arena to the place where Ethan stood. He had experienced artillery barrages with less attention focused on him. "Maybe she's looking for someone behind me," he muttered. The elderly spectator from earlier shook his head. "There is no one behind you." Ethan glanced over his shoulder anyway. There was still only the food vendor. The vendor raised a bowl. "I have soup." "Good for you." "It really is." The warrior continued forward. Her emerald eyes never left Ethan's. The closer she came, the more fragments surfaced from memories he had spent years trying to bury. Smoke swallowing the horizon. Emergency beacons blinking through acid rain. A battlefield littered with burning dropships. A distress signal in a language human translators barely understood. He remembered disobeying orders. Just once. Or perhaps several times in rapid succession. His commanding officer had called it reckless. Ethan had called it obvious. You don't leave wounded people behind. The memory faded again before he could grasp the details. She stopped only a few steps away. Silence spread outward like ripples across still water. Thousands watched. Neither of them spoke. For several long seconds, they simply looked at one another. Then she smiled. It wasn't a triumphant smile. It wasn't the smile of a conqueror. It was one of relief. "I found you." Her voice was calm, but something inside it carried years of searching. Ethan blinked. "I'm sorry. You do not remember." It wasn't a question. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I've seen more battlefields than birthdays." A faint laugh escaped her. "I expected as much." She slowly reached toward the small pendant hanging around her neck. A weathered piece of black alloy, scored by plasma burns, bent slightly along one edge. Ethan's eyes widened. "That's impossible. You recognize it." "I made that." Around them, confused whispers multiplied. "What is that? Why is the first spear talking to a traveler? Who is he?" The pendant rested in her palm. "You placed this inside my armor before carrying me onto your evacuation shuttle." The battlefield returned with startling clarity. An orbital defense station collapsing from the sky. Mercenary walkers advancing through burning forests. An alien officer pinned beneath twisted wreckage. Young, bleeding. Still trying to stand despite half her squad already gone. She had tried to fight him, even while barely conscious. He had laughed, then injected emergency stabilizers into her shoulder. "You can arrest me later," he had said. She had blacked out before answering. The memory ended. Ethan exhaled slowly. "You survived. Because you ignored your own command. So that's how that court-martial started." She tilted her head. "Court-martial?" A human way of saying my superiors were extremely disappointed. "They punished you." They certainly filled out impressive paperwork. A few nearby spectators exchanged puzzled looks. One quietly asked another, "What is paperwork?" "I don't know." "It sounds dangerous." "It probably is." The warrior laughed. The sound surprised everyone. Some younger warriors stared as though witnessing a solar eclipse. Did she just laugh? "I think so." "Write today's date down." "I forgot my tablet." "You fool." She looked back at Ethan. "You carried me 6 kilometers through active combat." "I honestly thought it was closer to 4. It was 6. I've always been bad at estimating distance." "You walked past 3 explosions." "There were definitely more than 3. She smiled wider. "You still joke." "It keeps me from screaming." She nodded once. "I understand." For a moment, neither spoke. The years between them seemed to disappear. Then, the chief elder rose from the ceremonial platform. His voice echoed across the arena. "First spear, why have you abandoned the procession?" Every eye turned toward her. She stood straight, proud, unshaken. Then she did something no one expected. She turned away from Ethan only long enough to face the thousands gathered around the arena. Her hand reached behind her shoulder. With one smooth motion, she drew the black spear from her back. Its surface awakened instantly. Tiny stars beneath the alloy began flowing like living galaxies. Gravity rippled across the arena. Dust floated upward. The hovering historical rings paused in midair. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Every warrior lowered their head. Ethan had absolutely no idea why. "Should I duck?" he whispered. The elderly spectator answered without taking his eyes off the warrior. "I honestly don't know." That answer did not improve Ethan's confidence. The warrior lifted the spear toward the sky. Her clear voice carried effortlessly across the silent valley. "My search," she paused, "is over." The words drifted across the valley, carried by a silence so complete that even the floating rings overhead seemed to delay their rotation. Thousands of eyes remained fixed upon the first spear. She lowered her weapon only slightly before turning toward Ethan once more. There was no uncertainty in her expression, no hesitation, only conviction that had apparently survived years of searching. The chief elder slowly descended the ceremonial platform. His robes shimmered with woven strands of living light, and two small hovering devices followed him, projecting ancient symbols around his shoulders. "First spear," he said evenly. "The rite has not yet reached its final declaration. I know. You stand before every clan. I know. You understand the weight of your next words. I have carried them long enough." The elder studied her for several quiet seconds before giving a slow nod. "So be it." He stepped aside. The movement alone caused whispers to erupt throughout the arena. He isn't stopping her. He can't. No one can. Ethan quietly raised a finger. "I'd like to mention I still have absolutely no idea what's happening." No one answered. That somehow made him even more nervous. The first spear walked until only a single pace separated them. "You truly do not remember my name." "I'm afraid not. I am Kaelira." The name stirred nothing. She seemed neither offended nor disappointed. "It has been 11 cycles. I've forgotten what I ate yesterday." A child nearby whispered to his mother. "Humans have terrible memory." His mother shrugged. "Apparently." Kaelira reached into a small compartment attached to her armor and withdrew a thin metallic plate. She offered it to Ethan. He accepted it carefully. The moment his fingers touched its surface, the plate activated. A tiny blue hologram flickered above it. The image showed a younger Kaelira lying unconscious inside a damaged evacuation shuttle. A human soldier knelt beside her, covered in soot, armor cracked, face partly hidden beneath a damaged combat helmet. Even through the distortion, Ethan recognized himself. The recording continued. "Medical stabilizers failing," a computer warned. The younger Ethan removed the emergency power cell from his own armor. Without hesitation, he connected it to the alien medical capsule. Warning lights vanished. His own armor immediately shut down. The hologram ended. Ethan stared quietly at the now dark plate. "I really was terrible at following regulations." Kaelira folded her arms. "You dismantled your own life support system. It seemed important. You nearly froze. I've made worse decisions." A voice from somewhere behind shouted, "No one makes worse decisions than my brother." Another voice answered, "I married you, didn't I?" Laughter rolled through the crowd. Even several warriors smiled despite themselves. The tension eased for only a moment. Then, one heavily armored warrior stepped forward from the assembled champions. His bronze armor bore countless victory markings. His long ears twitched with barely restrained irritation. "First spear." She turned. "Commander Varek." His eyes briefly settled on Ethan, then returned to her. "Is this outsider the reason you interrupted our sacred procession?" "Yes." "He is unarmed." "Correct." "He wears no clan colors." "Correct." "He has not requested audience." "He did not know he required one." A few spectators snorted. Varek ignored them. "This gathering is not a marketplace for surprises." Ethan quietly lifted one hand. "I completely agree." Several nearby people nodded. One elderly woman muttered, "Finally, someone sensible." Kaelira's gaze never left Varek. "I interrupted because I recognized the one who preserved my life." Varek's expression hardened. "One act of kindness does not place him among us." "It does to me." The words spread through the crowd almost faster than sound itself. Ethan could practically hear rumors reproducing. One teenager whispered excitedly, "I told you something dramatic would happen." His friend sighed. "I bet on ceremonial dancing." "You always lose." The chief elder raised one hand. Instant silence returned. He looked toward Ethan. Traveler. Ethan. Ethan Mercer. You stand before traditions older than many civilizations. I've gathered that. Do you understand why our champion speaks with such certainty? Ethan answered honestly. No. Several elders exchanged amused glances. One quietly admitted, that is probably the wisest answer today. The chief elder nodded once. Then allow the rite to continue. Kaelira slowly turned away from Ethan. She climbed 3 broad steps leading toward the center of the arena. Every warrior present straightened instinctively. The floating rings overhead brightened again, projecting unfamiliar symbols across the sky. The symbols aligned into a single glowing circle directly above her. She raised her black spear once more. This time, its tiny stars expanded beyond the weapon itself. A ribbon of shimmering gravity spiraled upward until it touched the circle overhead. The ancient technology beneath the arena awakened with a deep vibration that Ethan felt through the soles of his boots. He frowned. That's not decorative. The elderly spectator beside him smiled. No. What is it? Our ancestors built nothing merely to look impressive. That's both fascinating and slightly terrifying. It usually is. Kaelira inhaled once. Then, with a voice that echoed from every hovering ring across the valley, she prepared to speak the ancient words every clan knew by heart, but that Ethan had never heard before. The glowing circle suspended above the arena pulsed once. Every floating ring answered with a low harmonic tone that seemed to come from the sky itself. The sound rolled across the valley until even the birds circling the tallest trees settled onto branches in unusual silence. Kaelira stood unmoving beneath the light. Then she spoke. Before the ancestors. Thousands bowed their heads. Before every clan. The elders lowered their ceremonial staffs. Before those who remember. The ancient rings brightened until countless streams of light connected them across the heavens. She turned toward Ethan. I declare the one I choose. For one heartbeat. Nothing happened. Ethan almost sighed in relief. Maybe this wasn't about him after. Kaelira lifted her spear. The glowing tip pointed directly at him. I choose Ethan Mercer. Silence vanished. The arena exploded into noise. Thousands of voices collided at once. What? A human? Did she just say a human? Did she say Ethan? Who's Ethan? I don't know. Find out. I can't. Everyone's yelling. The floating rings reacted instantly. Blue beams swept over Ethan before projecting his bewildered face hundreds of meters above the arena for every spectator to see. He looked up. Really? One of the rings politely zoomed in. Oh, come on. A child pointed excitedly. The sky likes him. I don't think it does, Ethan muttered. The chief elder closed his eyes for a long moment. Whether from patience or exhaustion was impossible to tell. Commander Varric stepped forward so abruptly that several younger warriors instinctively reached for their weapons. This cannot stand. Kaelira faced him calmly. It already does. You invoke the right upon an outsider. I invoke it upon the one I have chosen. He belongs to no clan. He belongs to his honor. Murmurs swept through the gathered warriors. Some nodded. Others looked horrified. One elderly spectator whispered to another, I haven't seen the council this uncomfortable since Elder Torin accidentally challenged his own reflection. His companion frowned. Did he win? No. Impressive. Ethan slowly raised both hands. If anyone is interested. No one was listening. I was going to say I have several questions. Still nothing. He sighed. This is becoming a pattern. The chief elder struck the base of his staff against the stone. The sharp sound echoed like a bell. Order gradually returned. Ethan Mercer. Yes? Step forward. Ethan looked around. Is refusing an option? No. I suspected that. He walked into the arena while thousands watched every step. It reminded him uncomfortably of military inspections, except there had usually been fewer glowing satellites recording everything. As he reached the center, faint blue lines illuminated beneath his boots. The arena had recognized him. He immediately frowned. I've never been here before. One of the younger priests stared at a floating display. The ancient systems disagree. What? Your biological signature is being accepted. That's impossible. So it would seem. Ancient symbols spread beneath Ethan's feet in widening circles. Far below the stone, something enormous hummed to life. Not violently, patiently, as though waking from an exceptionally long sleep. Several technicians monitoring crystal consoles exchanged worried looks. We're receiving energy from the lower vaults. Those systems haven't activated in centuries. They're recognizing both of them. How? No idea. The chief elder looked toward the displays. His calm expression faltered for the first time. Seal the lower archives. They're not responding. What do you mean, not responding? They're unlocking. Across the arena, ancient doors hidden within the surrounding cliffs emitted deep mechanical sounds. Dust drifted from seams no one had noticed before. Massive stone slabs shifted by only a fraction, enough to reveal thin lines of brilliant white light beneath them. The spectators collectively took one cautious step backward. Even Commander Varek looked unsettled. Ethan glanced toward the opening doors. I don't suppose that's part of the ceremony. The elder answered quietly. No. That's unfortunate. It is. Kaelira remained beside him. Her attention never wandered from the awakening structures. My grandmother spoke of this. You've seen this before? No. Then what did she tell you? She said our ancestors left machines that would awaken only when forgotten promises returned. Ethan rubbed his forehead. I was hoping retirement involved significantly fewer forgotten promises. A nearby merchant overheard him. I told my wife retirement was dangerous. His wife crossed her arms. You retired for 3 days. I became bored. You tried building a fusion grill. It almost worked. It exploded. It cooked half the fish. She reluctantly nodded. It did. Despite the growing unease, laughter rippled through the nearest spectators. Ethan smiled faintly. Some things apparently were universal. Marriage, bad inventions, terrible timing. Then every glowing ring in the sky abruptly changed color. The soft blue light shifted into brilliant gold. A calm, artificial voice echoed across the valley in a language no one present had heard spoken aloud for thousands of years. Yet somehow, Ethan understood every word. Primary compatibility confirmed. Guardian lineage detected. Awaiting joint authorization. The valley fell into another uneasy silence. Not the respectful silence that had accompanied the ceremony. This one carried confusion, fear, and the unmistakable sound of several tribal scholars desperately trying to remember whether they had ever skipped an important history lesson. The golden rings continued circling overhead. Primary compatibility confirmed. Guardian lineage detected. Awaiting joint authorization. The words repeated calmly, exactly as though awakening forgotten superstructures beneath a planet happened every afternoon. Ethan looked around. Is anyone else understanding that voice? Several warriors exchanged puzzled looks. Commander Varek frowned. I hear only ancient speech. The chief elder slowly turned toward Ethan. You understand it? I apparently do. You speak the first language? I didn't even know there was a first one. A younger scholar nearly dropped his crystal tablet. Impossible. An older scholar corrected him. Technically improbable. Isn't that the same thing? No. I dislike scholars. We're accustomed to that. The chief elder lifted a hand before another argument could begin. Ethan, Yes. What exactly did the machine say? He repeated every word. As he spoke, several elders visibly stiffened. One elderly woman whispered something that caused another elder to grip his staff a little tighter. Kaelira noticed. What does it mean? The chief elder answered carefully. There are stories. There are always stories. These are older than our tribes. He turned toward the awakening doors cut into the surrounding cliffs. Our ancestors believed this world was once protected by guardians. Guardians, not rulers. Then what? Partners. Ethan frowned. Partners with whom? The elder looked directly at him. Humans. That single word swept through the gathering like a sudden gust of wind. Immediately, voices erupted again. Our legends never mentioned humans. They were symbolic. Maybe. No, symbolic. You're symbolic. Thank you. That wasn't a compliment. A nearby merchant sighed. I miss when today's biggest concern was overpriced festival food. His daughter nodded. The sweet cakes are still overpriced. They're worth it. They absolutely are. Even Ethan laughed quietly. Then the ground trembled again. This time, everyone stopped laughing. The massive stone doors opened another meter. Brilliant white light spilled across the arena. Inside, rows of towering humanoid figures stood perfectly motionless. At first, Ethan thought they were statues. Then one turned its head, very slowly. Metal, ceramic, unknown alloys. Each machine easily stood 4 meters tall. Their eyes glowed faintly beneath elegant helmets. The valley collectively inhaled. A technician shouted from one of the crystal consoles. Energy levels rising, another answered. The lower city is activating. What lower city? I didn't know there was one. Commander Varric immediately stepped between the opening vault and the spectators. Warriors! Hundreds of spears snapped upright in perfect synchronization. Energy blades ignited. The familiar hum filled the air. Ethan instinctively shifted his weight. Retirement, unfortunately, had once again become unavailable. Kaelira glanced sideways. You noticed. I always notice. You moved before anyone else. My knees complained first. She smiled, despite everything. You are getting older. I preferred it when enemies respected my age. I doubt the machines care. I was afraid you'd say that. One of the giant constructs stepped beyond the doorway. Every warrior tightened their grip. The machine stopped. Golden light scanned across the assembled crowd before settling upon Ethan. Then Kaelira. The construct lowered one armored arm across its chest. Not an attack, a salute. The artificial voice echoed once more. Guardian candidates identified. Ethan blinked. Oh no. Kaelira looked at him. You dislike being called Guardian. I dislike being volunteered. The machine continued. Authorization required. Commander Varric remained unconvinced. This could be deception. The chief elder nodded slowly. It could. Ethan looked toward the construct. Can I ask it questions? Everyone stared at him. You ask hostile machines questions, Varric said. I've tried shooting first. And? It usually creates more paperwork. Several nearby warriors whispered. There is that word again. It continues sounding unpleasant. I think humans fear paperwork more than war. They might. The construct remained perfectly still, apparently patient enough to wait another 1,000 years if necessary. Ethan stepped forward. Varric immediately blocked his path. You cannot trust it. I don't. You still approach? I've also never trusted suspicious doors. And? They're usually hiding something. Kaelira looked between the two men. He saved my life because he walked toward danger while everyone else retreated. Varric answered quietly. That is exactly what worries me. Ethan gave him a small smile. Reasonable concern. Then he stepped around him. Every instinct screamed that this was reckless. Unfortunately, his instincts had been saying that since he was 19. He stopped several meters before the ancient machine. So, the construct waited. "Hello." Several children watching from the back giggled. One whispered, "He talks to robots politely." His grandmother answered, "Good manners cost nothing." The machine inclined its head. "Greetings acknowledged. Guardian Ethan Mercer." Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment. I was really enjoying retirement. No one spoke for several long seconds after the construct addressed Ethan by name. The towering machine remained motionless, its golden eyes fixed upon him with a patience that belonged to something that measured time in centuries rather than heartbeats. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. "I appreciate the greeting." The construct inclined its head. Courtesy acknowledged. "That's unexpectedly polite." It was the preferred protocol of the first Guardians. Ethan sighed. "I really need to stop accidentally joining ancient organizations." A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Even Commander Varick's stern expression softened. Only slightly. The chief elder stepped beside Ethan. "Can your people hear me?" The construct answered immediately. "We serve the Accord." "What accord?" "The covenant established between the first settlers of Kareth and the Human Guardian expedition." Gasps echoed across the arena. For generations, the tribes had believed they had always stood alone. The machine continued. "When the colonies prospered, the Guardians departed." "Why did they never return?" Kaelira asked. "War." One word. Quiet. Heavy. Ethan lowered his eyes. He understood that answer better than anyone wished to. Records lost. Communication ended. Mission suspended. The construct paused before speaking again. "Awaiting successors." The chief elder looked around the gathering. So the legends were true. An elderly scholar laughed quietly. "I owe my students an apology." One young scholar grinned. "I wrote my exam saying the stories were myths." The old scholar sighed. "You passed." "I shouldn't have." "You definitely shouldn't have." Laughter returned. This time it felt lighter. The ancient tension surrounding forgotten history slowly dissolved beneath relief. Commander Varick stepped toward Ethan. For a moment everyone expected another argument. Instead, he extended his hand. "I judged you before knowing you." Ethan accepted it. "You weren't entirely wrong." "I expected arrogance." "I left most of that in my 20s. "Only most?" "I'm still working on it." Several warriors nearby chuckled. Varick actually smiled, a rare enough event that one child loudly whispered, "I didn't know he could do that." Neither did his father. Over the following days, the awakening systems revealed their purpose. The ancient vaults contained libraries instead of weapons, medical technology rather than armies, agricultural machines capable of restoring exhausted forests, orbital relays waiting patiently to reconnect Kareth with distant human worlds. Nothing had been built for conquest. Everything had been built to endure. The discovery transformed every discussion among the clans. Old rivalries suddenly seemed embarrassingly small beside a history that belonged to all of them. Ethan stayed, not because anyone demanded it, because for the first time in many years he found himself somewhere that didn't ask him to fight. Instead, children dragged him into games he barely understood. Scholars insisted on interviewing him about human history. He accidentally became the official taste tester for experimental festival desserts. The position proved surprisingly dangerous. After sampling one glowing pastry, his tongue turned bright blue again. The baker proudly announced, "Improved recipe." "It still changes tongue color." "Yes." "Why?" "We've stopped asking." Kaelira laughed so hard she nearly dropped her cup. "You survived another battle." "Barely." "You looked more frightened by the pastry." "It attacked first." Word spread across Kareth that the retired guardian feared desserts. The rumor became impossible to erase. Months later, during the next gathering of spears, The valley filled once again. Not with suspicion, with celebration. The floating rings projected scenes from the newly recovered history beside the ancient legends, allowing both pasts to exist together. Humans arrived openly through restored orbital routes. The tribes welcomed them not as strangers, but as distant family returning home. The chief elder stood before the assembled clans. Our traditions teach that strength preserves. He looked toward Ethan. Compassion restores. Then toward Kaelira. And wisdom chooses. Thousands of warriors struck the butts of their spears against the stone. The sound rolled across the valley like thunder. Kaelira stepped beside Ethan. I made quite a scene the first time. You certainly did. Do you regret it? He looked across the gathering, at laughing children, at scholars arguing over history, at warriors sharing meals with visitors from worlds they had never imagined meeting, at ancient machines quietly tending gardens instead of preparing for war. Then he looked at her, the woman with the long ears, whom he had once carried across a battlefield without even learning her name. Years ago, he had believed saving one stranger had been a small decision. Now he understood that kindness could echo farther than any weapon ever fired. He smiled. I came here hoping to disappear. And I'd much rather belong. Kaelira reached for his hand. This time, he took it without hesitation. Above them, the restored satellites scattered ribbons of golden light across the evening sky. The ancient guardian construct observed silently from the edge of the valley, before speaking one final time. Mission updated. Everyone looked toward it. Guardianship, successfully renewed. For the first time in countless centuries, the old machine powered down not because its duty had ended, but because it finally trusted someone else to continue it. Ethan watched the stars emerge one by one above Kareth. He had crossed the galaxy searching for peace. He found a home instead.